Hello. My name is Raya Jameson. I wasn't invited to the stage. I wasn't even listed in the program. But I showed up. I watched my sister, the golden one, accept a promotion built on my work, my silence. And when I tried to hand her the truth, she slapped me. Right there. In front of family, friends, strangers. She called me a loser. They laughed. They filmed it. 2 minutes later, I ended her career. But let me ask you something. How does a family get so good at erasing one of their own? And how many times do you let it happen before you finally speak? Let me tell you what came before the slap, what came after, and what still lingers in the silence. Would you have done what I did? I arrived a few minutes past 6, early enough to be polite, late enough to not look desperate. The valet took my keys with the kind of smile that's all teeth and no warmth, the kind you see in places like Beverly Hills. Expensive smiles for expensive guests. I paused outside the glass doors, straightened my blazer, and reminded myself why I was here. You came because Dad would have wanted you to show up. Inside, the ballroom glowed gold. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like frost. Everything about the space screamed success, the kind of success that belonged to my sister, Callista. She stood near the stage, radiant, wrapped in silk and attention. Her laughter carried across the room, effortless, rehearsed. When she noticed me, her smile didn't falter, but her eyes cooled, calculating. She turned to greet another guest instead. That was her way of saying hello. A young usher, barely 20, approached me with an awkward grin. "Good evening, ma'am. May I show you to your seat?" "Sure," I said, even though I could see empty tables closer to the stage. He led me toward the back, way back, to a small round table beside the emergency exit. I caught sight of my name card and smiled wryly. Ronna Jameson. Not even spelled right. The seat rocked slightly on uneven carpet. Around me, guests chattered about vacations and mergers. None of them met my eyes. A few recognized me, but chose not to acknowledge it. People remember hierarchy, not faces. I folded my hands in my lap, staring at the half-filled water glass in front of me. The condensation slid down like time running out. I could already feel that familiar heat behind my ribs, the quiet humiliation that comes when you realize you've been invited only to fill space. Callista's voice rose above the hum. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she announced from the stage. "This promotion isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who believed in me." The crowd applauded on cue. I didn't. She began her slideshow, photos of her shaking hands with executives, posing in boardrooms, hugging clients. Then came the family section. I heard a few coos. "What a beautiful family." Right before the picture appeared, my stomach tightened. It was the same Christmas photo we'd taken 5 years ago, except now my face was cropped out cleanly, as if I had never been there. Gasps rippled through the tables. Someone whispered, "That's cold." A few nervous laughs followed, and then silence. I looked toward Mom. She didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed fixed on the screen, hands folded neatly in her lap. I swallowed hard. So this was planned. Callista kept talking as if nothing happened. "Family means everything, doesn't it?" she said, smiling into the lights. "Especially when they support you no matter what." The guests clapped again. My palms were damp. I thought about leaving, just standing up and walking out, but the thought of my father's voice stopped me. "You don't let them push you out, Raya.
You stay until the end."
I stayed. The speeches dragged on. Waiters refilled glasses. Laughter ebbed and flowed. My mind wandered back to childhood dinners when Callista was praised for every little thing, her grades, her charm, her leadership. I was the quiet one, the helper, the one who made room for her spotlight. Every compliment she received came at the price of my invisibility. Now, decades later, the pattern hadn't changed. Halfway through dessert, a woman I barely knew leaned over. "You must be so proud of your sister," she said. Her perfume was sharp, citrusy. "She mentioned you helped her study back in college, right?" I forced a smile. "Something like that." The woman nodded, satisfied, already turning away to talk to someone more important. I took a sip of water and caught my reflection in the glass. Tired eyes, practiced composure. I tried not to stare at Callista, but it was impossible. She moved like someone who believed the world revolved on her schedule. Every laugh was timed. Every gesture broadcast confidence. And yet, behind it, I saw something else, something rehearsed too many times. I remembered the last real conversation we'd had, years ago. She told me, You're too sensitive, Raya. You take everything personally. Success is about optics, not feelings. Maybe tonight was her way of proving that point. When the applause rose again, I looked around the table. Strangers clapped. Wine glasses chimed. I sat motionless. My pulse matched the rhythm of the music, a low thud against my ribs. Part of me wanted to confront her right there. Ask if cutting me from that photo made her feel taller. But another part, the calmer, older version of me, knew that wouldn't change anything. People like Callista didn't respond to emotion. They fed on it. I exhaled slowly, steadying my breath. My father's last words echoed in my memory. Don't let them erase you. The thought settled in me like steel. As the event rolled into its second hour, servers cleared plates and lights dimmed for the tribute video. My hands rested over my purse under the table. The leather was warm from my grip. My heartbeat slowed. I began watching not just as a sister, but as a witness, cataloging every slight, every glance, every false word. From across the room, Callista glanced in my direction again. This time she didn't smile like before. Her expression lingered, sharp, assessing, almost like she could feel my composure solidifying. The MC made another announcement. Please stay seated as we prepare for the highlight of the evening, our guest of honor's surprise message. Callista waved her hand dramatically, feigning modesty. The room shimmered with expectation. I sat perfectly still, refusing to move, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. Then her eyes found me again. That same polished grin stretched across her face, but something in it changed. It wasn't warmth, it was warning. My sister's smile froze in place as she scanned the room. She turned her head just enough for our eyes to meet across the distance. Her expression said, "Stay in your seat." I did. My fork rested untouched on the plate, next to salmon I didn't taste, and champagne I didn't drink. Around me, the clatter of silverware and polite laughter filled the air like background noise in someone else's movie. When the applause for her speech finally died down, waiters began serving coffee. I looked toward my mother. She was seated closer to the front, at a table reserved for family. Callista had placed her there, of course, right where the cameras could see. Mom's posture was perfect, back straight, chin high, that faint smile she saved for public occasions. I waited for her to look back, to give me the smallest nod of reassurance. She didn't. When her eyes did find me, it wasn't warmth I saw, it was reproach. That slight tilt of her head, the pinch at her lips. The same look she gave when I was a child and spilled juice on the carpet. That tiny, controlled shake, as if to say, "Why are you even here, Raya?" Something inside me folded over. I turned away, pretending to check my phone. The screen glowed empty. For a moment, I felt foolish for expecting anything else. In our family, silence was a weapon, and Mom had mastered it long ago. Across the hall, Callista was surrounded by people again. Executives, friends, whoever made her look more successful. She thrived in those clusters of admiration. The louder the crowd, the higher she stood. I tried to focus on my breathing, to slow the heartbeat that seemed too loud in my chest. The air in the ballroom was heavy with perfume and pretense. Every laugh sounded rehearsed. Every compliment, rehearsed. Then someone near the bar called out, "Vera, you have to show us that wall near the entrance. It's stunning." My mother hesitated for a fraction of a second, then smiled that polished hostess smile. "Of course. This way." A group of guests followed her, wine glasses in hand. I stayed behind at first, but something about her quick glance, one part pride, one part fear, pulled me to my feet. I trailed them at a distance. They stopped near the entrance, where a long display stretched across the wall, framed photos, awards, newspaper clippings. The words etched on the gold plaque above it read, "The Jameson Family Legacy." My throat tightened before I even saw it. Front and center hung a glossy family portrait. My mother, my older brother Andrew, and Callista. Beneath it, the caption read, "Vera, Callista, and Andrew, the roots of our strength." No mention of me. Not even a space where I might have been cropped out. It was as if I had never existed. The guests murmured approval. "Such a beautiful family," one woman said. "3 generations of achievement," another added. My pulse thudded in my ears. I wanted to step closer, to look for any sign of myself hidden in the reflection of the glass, but I already knew there was nothing there. Mom glanced back and caught my eye for a brief second. Her smile flickered, not out of guilt, but warning. Then she turned away. I walked back toward the ballroom, each step heavier than the last. I stopped by the restroom doorway, gripping the marble counter until my fingers ached. The reflection staring back at me in the mirror looked composed, but my stomach felt like ice. For years, I told myself that distance made things easier, that living in Austin instead of Los Angeles spared me from the games. Yet standing there, in the middle of a crowd that shared my blood, I had never felt more like a stranger. A memory surfaced uninvited. A dinner years ago, when I brought home a proposal for a community health project. Mom had leaned toward her friend and whispered, thinking I didn't hear, "Raya's the one who always makes things complicated." I never forgot the tone, half pity, half annoyance. That sentence built a wall higher than miles ever could. Now, watching my family celebrate a version of success that erased me, I understood something new. I wasn't invisible because I failed. I was invisible because I refused to play their part. The thought steadied me. I stepped outside into the hallway, away from the music and chatter. The corridor was cool, dimly lit. Through the glass doors, I could see palm trees swaying in the night breeze, the sky shifting from twilight to ink. I took a slow breath. For a brief moment, I thought about calling a car, going home, pretending none of this ever happened. But no, that would be exactly what they wanted. I turned back toward the ballroom. As I re-entered, the light hit my eyes again, warm, almost blinding after the darkness outside. Callista stood by the media backdrop, posing with a local news anchor. Mom hovered beside them, fixing Callista's hair, beaming with pride. They looked like a perfect tableau of success. Callista saw me over the anchor's shoulder. Her expression didn't change. She just lifted her chin slightly, like royalty acknowledging a servant. That was enough. I walked past them without stopping. Mom caught my arm gently as I passed. "Smile, sweetheart," she whispered, still facing the camera. "People are watching." I smiled because I'd learned long ago that smiling keeps the peace. Then I eased my arm from her grip. "Don't worry, Mom," I said quietly. "I know my role tonight." Her face softened for a second, almost relief, until she realized what I meant. I moved back to my table and sat down, crossing my legs, folding my napkin with deliberate calm. Callista's laughter carried from the photo line. Every flash of the camera was another nail sealing my place in the charade. I picked up my glass and traced the rim with my finger. My voice came out low enough for only me to hear. "They want me to walk out. That's their script." I set the glass down, aligning it perfectly with the edge of the plate. "Not tonight." I lifted my eyes toward the stage again, watching as the MC returned to the microphone, announcing yet another surprise segment in Callista's honor. The crowd stirred with anticipation. My mother clapped enthusiastically. Callista glowed in the spotlight, feeding off the energy like oxygen. I stayed seated, calm, invisible, waiting for the next act in this performance I was never meant to survive. But I had no idea that the most humiliating moment of my adult life was only minutes away. The MC's voice cut through the murmur of guests, too cheerful to be real. "Ladies and gentlemen, our guest of honor has one final surprise to share before dessert." Callista's earrings caught the light as she stepped back onto the stage. Her confidence filled the room like perfume, sweet, overwhelming, and impossible to escape. I shifted in my chair, my napkin clutched in my lap. She started thanking people. To my incredible colleagues, my amazing leadership team, my mentors, her voice softened as she turned toward our mother. And, of course, to my family, my rock. Applause. Cameras flashed. I clapped too, just enough to look civil. Her list moved on. To our brother, to her assistant, to her supportive network. My name never left her lips. I smiled faintly. Being forgotten was practically a family tradition. Someone behind me whispered, "She's so composed, isn't she?" They meant Callista, but the words pressed into me like pins. The lights dimmed a little as servers brought out slices of cake with gold leaf garnish. I pushed mine away untouched. The smell of sugar mixed with something metallic, resentment, maybe. Then Callista's tone changed. "Before we wrap up, I'd like to recognize someone special," she said. An anonymous supporter who made a very generous donation to our Women in Leadership initiative. A screen behind her flickered to life, showing a gold plaque. In big bold letters, "Donation by Danielle Grace." The crowd clapped. A few turned to look for Danielle, who blushed prettily at her table. My stomach dropped. Danielle Grace wasn't the donor. I was. I'd sent the funds quietly, through a legal intermediary, wanting to strengthen the program, not to build a name for myself. I never told anyone, except one person in accounting who handled the paperwork. Somehow, the credit had been rerouted. I unlocked my phone under the table and pulled up the confirmation email. The numbers matched. The donation amount, the date, the purpose, it was mine. Only the name was gone. I reread it twice, as if that could change it back. When I looked up, Callista was smiling straight at me. It was quick, almost invisible, but I saw it, a flicker of triumph. My throat tightened. You took that too, I thought. The applause rolled on. Callista moved seamlessly to the next slide, showing charts of her philanthropic vision. I tuned out the rest of her speech, watching her lips move, hearing only the blood rushing in my ears. I stood and slipped toward the refreshment bar, pretending to refill my water. The air there felt cooler, thinner. A man's voice came from my left, quiet but certain. You're Raya Jameson, right? I turned. A young man, early 30s, maybe, stood there with a drink in his hand. His tie was crooked, his expression serious. Yes, I said cautiously. He leaned a little closer. I probably shouldn't be saying this, but your sister used your strategy file. I blinked. What? The global rebranding plan. The one that landed the company this new partnership. Everyone knows it was yours. You wrote it 2 years ago, right? I felt the floor sway slightly beneath me. Yes, I whispered. I did. He nodded. Word spread that she presented it as her own. That's what got her this promotion. His voice lowered even further. I just thought you should know. People talk, but nobody wants to cross her. The ice in his glass clinked as he shifted awkwardly. Then he added, almost apologetically, I'm sorry. It isn't fair. Before I could answer, someone called his name from across the room. He gave me a quick, nervous nod and walked away. I stayed there, hand trembling slightly around my glass. The global rebrand. The late nights. The endless drafts. I'd poured months into it. Callista must have gone through my old files when I helped her proofread a presentation last year. She must have taken it then. For a moment, I felt dizzy, as though all the air had been sucked out of the ballroom. Laughter echoed behind me, bright and hollow. I moved toward the exit, each step heavier than the one before. The hallway outside was quiet. The distant music muffled through the doors. I pressed my palms against the cool wall and breathed. So this was it, the final proof. Not only had she stolen credit, she'd stolen my name, my work, even my good intentions. I stepped out onto the terrace. The night air was cooler than I expected, brushing against my face like an unwelcome reminder that I was still here, still breathing. The city lights stretched below, glittering like tiny lies. I leaned on the railing, letting the sound of distant traffic fill the spaces, my thoughts left empty. All I wanted was acknowledgement, not fame, not applause, just for anyone to say, that was her idea. Inside, Callista's voice carried through the open doors. She was laughing with a reporter now, probably spinning another story about hard work and sisterly inspiration. The irony stung. I whispered to no one. I didn't want to be famous. I just wanted to be respected. The words felt fragile, too soft against the noise behind me. Somewhere deep inside my purse, my phone buzzed. A notification lit the screen, a text from my lawyer. The preview line read, all finalized. Congratulations, Raya. I didn't open it. Not yet. The laughter from the ballroom grew louder. Music swelled for the closing toast. I wiped my face, squared my shoulders, and turned back toward the doors. If humiliation was the art form of my family, I had just learned the fine art of disappearing. But the night wasn't over, and neither was I. That message had arrived exactly 30 minutes ago, and it would change everything. I stepped back into the lounge and shut the terrace door behind me, muffling the laughter and clinking glasses from inside. My thumb hovered over the text on my phone, the one I hadn't opened since it buzzed in my hand 30 minutes ago. I sat on a cream-colored couch tucked in the far corner of the room and took a deep breath, steadying myself. The message was from Ben, my attorney. Short, direct, and attached with a video file. Effective this morning, you are now the majority shareholder of Altera Holdings, which owns the parent company of Callista's firm. As discussed, full voting authority has transferred to your name. Congratulations. P.S. There's something else you might want to see. My finger hesitated over the video thumbnail. A still frame showed my father, Merrick, seated in his garage workshop. The background was familiar, cluttered with dusty tools, old wood cabinets, and that faded, proud Union veteran sign he refused to take down. I tapped play. He looked tired in the video, older than I remembered. His gray t-shirt was stained, and he had that same grease mark on his cheek he never bothered to wipe off. But his eyes looked straight into mine like he knew exactly when I'd be watching this. "Hey, kiddo," he said, voice low and even. "If you're seeing this, then things probably turned out exactly like I figured they would." He took a breath, rubbed his jaw. "I know how they treat you, like a shadow in your own damn family. And I know it hurts more, because you keep pretending it doesn't.
But I see you, Raya.
I always have." My throat tightened. I blinked, but the tears didn't fall. I just watched. I didn't have much in this life. A garage.
A name.
A few people I'd die for. You were always one of them. So when I had the chance to do something that meant you'd never have to beg for a seat at their table again, I did it. He held up a signed document, the camera picking up the date, 2 years ago.
You own it now.
You own the table, and you decide who gets to sit at it. The video ended. The screen faded to black, but his words stayed sharp in my chest. I stayed there for several minutes, barely moving. The noise from the ballroom was distant again, like a TV left on in someone else's house. Then I slipped the phone into my purse and stood. As I made my way down the hallway, the scent of floral perfume grew stronger. The hallway opened back into the main room, where waiters moved between tables with champagne and chocolate mousse. Guests laughed louder now, their tipsiness softening the tension. Just as I reached the edge of the room, Jace appeared beside me. He didn't say anything at first, just handed me a plain black folder. I looked down at it, then back at him. "What's this?" "Evidence," he said quietly, "of what your sister's been doing with the company funds. Fake charitable invoices. Event budgets that were inflated and rerouted back to personal accounts. She's been laundering her image using corporate donations. This," he tapped the folder, "proves it." I held the folder, stunned. My hands didn't shake this time. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked. Jace shrugged, glancing around to make sure no one noticed us. "Because I believe in legacy. And truth. And I've watched her burn good people for sport. You don't seem like someone who forgets things." I opened the folder just enough to glimpse the contents. He wasn't exaggerating. Emails. Wire transfers. Financial statements. All of it lined up with the whispers I'd ignored for years. "Thank you," I said softly. Jace gave a short nod and disappeared into the crowd. For a moment, I stood still. Then I walked back to my seat, not rushing, not hesitating. The folder was heavier than it looked. I passed by Vera on the way. She was standing with a group of older women, laughing gently at something one of them said. Her eyes landed on me briefly. She stepped closer and murmured, "It's a good night, Raya. Don't ruin it." I stopped beside her. "No, Mom," I said, my voice calm and quiet. "Not tonight. But soon." She frowned, caught off guard. "What's that supposed to mean?" But I didn't answer. I walked back to my table, sat down, and placed the folder in front of me like it was part of the cutlery. The MC was on stage again, thanking sponsors. Callista stood behind him, posing with the donor plaque that should have carried my name. The lights hit her just right. She looked flawless. I didn't take my eyes off her. As applause echoed again, a thought surfaced in my mind. Not loud, not sharp, just steady. I could leave now. Walk out, say nothing. Let them keep pretending. Be the quiet one again. But then who would I be honoring? Myself? Or the edited version they'd spent years constructing for me? I adjusted the folder slightly on the table and picked up my glass. The liquid inside barely moved. My hand was steady now. Callista laughed with someone across the room, completely unaware of what I now held. But she would know. Very soon. This wasn't vengeance. It was reclamation. I watched the stage, silent and still, as the spotlight circled around the room. Callista should have sensed it then, the shift in air, the weight of a storm rising. But like all storms, it didn't come with thunder first. The air in the ballroom had shifted. Not noticeably, not enough for anyone else to name it, but I felt it. A current of stillness under all the sound. My hands were steady now. My thoughts were lined up like soldiers. I moved quietly through the side hallway, following a server who gave me a small nod and slipped something into my hand. A thick cream-colored envelope, sealed with a wax stamp. It felt heavy. Not from weight, but from consequence. I stepped into the powder room just off the dessert station. It was empty, softly lit, with gold-rimmed mirrors and the kind of luxury hand soap you never actually need. I locked the stall door behind me and sat down on the velvet bench near the wall. With deliberate hands, I opened the envelope. The legal language was dense, but I knew what I was looking for. My name, my authority, my father's trust. Effective as of 9 a.m. that morning, I had been granted full voting rights as the majority shareholder of Altera Holdings. The holding company owned several smaller subsidiaries, including the firm that currently employed my sister. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel afraid, either. Just anchored. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't drifting through someone else's version of my life. I slid the papers back into the envelope, tucked it inside my purse, and stood. I checked my reflection. Not for vanity, but for resolve. My face looked older in the light. Tired, sure, but also sharper. I leaned toward the mirror and whispered, "Not yet." Outside, the party had rolled into its last phase. Most guests were either tipsy or halfway to full.
Dessert had been served.
Toasts were wrapping up. The press wall, where Callista had posed all night, now hosted only the occasional straggler taking selfies. I was halfway back to my table when I felt a hand on my arm. Light, familiar. My mother. "Can we talk for a minute?" she asked, keeping her voice low. I followed her toward a quiet corner just off the coat check, behind a cluster of floral arrangements. I could still hear the music faintly from here, but it was private enough. "I know you're upset," she began. I didn't answer. I wanted to see where she was going. She smiled softly, in that trained way she always used when trying to seem composed. "Callista means well."
You know how she is.
She doesn't know how to show love properly." A beat passed between us. I didn't interrupt. Mom went on. "I told her not to use that photo. The one without you in it. But she said it was already printed, and well, these things move fast. She didn't mean anything by it." I said nothing. She tried again. "Raya, please. Don't cause a scene. Not tonight. Not over something so petty." I turned my face slowly toward her.
Petty.
Her eyes hesitated. "Do you even know what she took from me?" I asked. "I know Mom started, but I cut in, calm and clear. "She didn't just cut me out of a photo. She's been cutting me out of our family for decades. And you've let her." I wasn't yelling. I didn't need to. "She took my work, my ideas, my name, and you're worried about keeping the evening nice." She made something of herself, my mother said, more sharply than intended. "That's what people remember. They remember who showed up, who performed. You've always chosen a different path." There it was. Her version of the truth. I drew in a breath and stood straighter. "You watched her erase me from your home, from your stories, and now, from your legacy." My voice didn't waver. "That ends tonight." My mother reached for my arm, but I stepped back. "Tell her," I said. "This is her final curtain. What happens next, she wrote it herself." She looked stunned, but I didn't give her time to respond. I turned and walked away, leaving her rooted there in her own discomfort. Back at my table, I placed the envelope down on the dinner plate, resting my fingers lightly on it like someone might rest a hand on a chess piece. I didn't open it, didn't wave it around. I didn't need to. Just the presence of it on the table felt like an invisible barrier. The room buzzed around me. Glasses clinked. Shoes tapped on marble. Someone nearby laughed too loudly at a joke that didn't land. Callista was mid-toast again, thanking the last round of sponsors. Her tone was breezy, full of gratitude that smelled too much like performance. She moved through her words like she'd rehearsed them in front of a mirror for hours. Across the room, her eyes found mine. We stared at each other. She tilted her head slightly, a soft arch of one brow that asked, "What are you doing?" I didn't blink. I didn't smile. She looked away first. For the first time all evening, she wasn't in control. I let the moment stretch. Let it soak into her awareness like a slow, creeping fog. Because she hadn't seen the envelope yet. She hadn't heard the voice of the man who once told me, "One day, they'll corner you, but you'll own the whole building they're standing in." He was right. And I wasn't going to waste the chance he left me. I folded my napkin neatly and placed it beside the envelope. The server came by to ask if I wanted dessert. I politely declined. From across the table, someone I didn't know leaned in and whispered, "You doing okay?" I smiled at her, a smile she didn't quite understand. "Yes," I said. "Better than I've been in a long time." And still, She chose to slap me anyway. The moment replayed in my head even before it happened. 100 versions of how it could go, all of them ending badly. Yet somehow, reality managed to be worse. I stood, calm, and began walking toward the stage. The noise in the ballroom softened as I moved, my heels clicking against the marble floor, steady and deliberate. I could feel eyes following me, some curious, some irritated that I was interrupting their carefully curated evening. Callista caught sight of me halfway there. Her expression tightened just slightly before the mask slipped back on. She laughed into the microphone. "Oh, look," she said brightly. "The quiet one has something to say." The crowd chuckled obediently. I reached the steps to the stage, envelope in hand. She turned toward me with a smirk so polished it could have been rehearsed. "Raya," she said in that honeyed tone that always preceded humiliation, "this is my night." "Maybe." I lifted the envelope toward her. "You might want to see what's inside." She leaned forward, pretending to whisper, but her voice carried through the microphone. "You really don't know when to stop, do you?" Then, with the grace of a showwoman and the cruelty of a sibling who'd practiced her performance, she raised her hand and struck me. It wasn't hard enough to knock me down.
It didn't need to be.
The sound cracked through the microphone, echoing around the ballroom like a gunshot. For a moment, silence. Then gasps. Someone near the front dropped a fork. Another whispered, "Did she just?" And then came the laughter. First uneasy, then rolling like a wave. The kind that fills every corner of the room and leaves nowhere to hide. "Oh my God," someone said between laughs. "She really slapped her." Another voice shouted from the back, phone raised high. "That's the promo clip right there." The audience turned into a sea of gleeful witnesses. Callista, still on stage, adjusted her hair as if fixing the balance of her crown. "Sorry, everyone," she said, breathless with mock amusement. "Some people just can't stand seeing others succeed." Her fans ate it up. Laughter swelled again. I stood there, one hand pressed to my cheek. It stung, but not from pain, more from disbelief. My other hand still clutched the envelope. I hadn't dropped it. I could feel the heat rise around me as voices overlapped. "She always was dramatic," someone whispered.
"Sensitive," another said.
"Jealous, probably." My mother's voice cut faintly through the noise. "Callista, that's enough." But her tone was half-hearted. The kind of reprimand meant more for the crowd than for conscience. I looked out over the tables. People averted their eyes when I met them, then whispered to whoever sat beside them. The laughter kept pulsing. It hit me all at once. How long I'd been training for this kind of silence. I'd lived my life learning to swallow humiliation so smoothly no one could see me choke on it. Callista smiled again, milking the moment. "You see, folks? Families, what can we do?" she said. "We love them anyway." And that was when something in me began to separate from everything else. The noise, the sting, even the shame. It all started fading to a low hum. Inside the hum came my father's voice. Not as memory, but as if he were standing right beside me. "They'll try to break you," he said, "but you are not built to be breakable." The laughter around me blurred, voices melting into a dull rhythm. I could hear my own breathing, steady and deep. My pulse slowed. I was no longer reacting. I was observing. I lowered my hand from my face. The sting was fading, and with it came clarity. I straightened my back, adjusted the lapel of my blazer, and looked directly at my sister. Callista's smirk faltered. She expected tears, maybe outrage, a scene. Instead, she found calm. I wasn't giving her the chaos she needed to feel powerful. The laughter began to die, one voice at a time, until the room hovered in uneasy quiet. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. My gaze moved across the crowd, lingering on the ones who had laughed the loudest. The ones who'd turned their cameras on me. The relatives who looked away now, ashamed. One of them, an uncle, tried to smile weakly. "Hey now, we're just having a little fun." I looked at him long enough that his smile collapsed into silence. Then I turned back to Callista. She was still holding the microphone, but her grip had tightened. I stepped closer, not enough to invade, but enough that she had to step back to keep her balance. "You think you've won something here," I said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. "But this isn't your stage anymore." Her eyes widened. "Excuse me?" I didn't reply. I simply turned around, calm and deliberate, and walked back down the stairs. The cameras followed me. The whispers rose again, confused, unsure what story they were watching now. By the time I reached my table, the laughter had stopped entirely. I placed the envelope back on my plate, exactly where it had been before, as if I'd only stepped away for a moment. I smoothed the napkin beside it, my movements careful, unhurried. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Callista staring down at me, unsure whether to keep pretending this was all part of her act. I met her eyes one last time and gave the smallest nod, one that said, "You started this. I'll finish it." The band struck up another song, but no one was really listening. Guests murmured, uneasy, glancing between us. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I sat there, hand resting lightly over the envelope, my father's words still echoing inside me. By the time I reached my table, the storm had already begun moving in my direction. I sat down without ceremony, my hands resting lightly on the envelope like it was nothing more than a folded napkin. The echoes from the slap had quieted, but something heavier had settled over the room. It wasn't silence. It was anticipation. Even Callista must have felt it, though she did everything she could to smother it under another toast. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she announced, glass raised, voice sugary sweet. "Truly, this has been one of the greatest moments of my life." The crowd clapped, more out of obligation now than joy. My mother nodded like a woman desperately trying to hold a facade together with threadbare pleasantries. I watched Callista step back from the microphone, glancing around like a queen awaiting her next subject. I reached to the seat beside me, picked up the spare microphone, and switched it on. "I'd like to say something," I said. Not loud, not soft, just enough. The applause stopped like a record scratch. I stood up slowly. "My name is Raya Jameson," I continued, "and as of this morning, I am the majority shareholder of Altera Holdings, which owns the parent company of this firm." The words dropped like stones into a still pond. A few gasps. One audible, "What?" from someone near the back. I let the weight of it land. Effective immediately, I added, "I am terminating the executive leadership team, including the current head of public relations, Callista Jameson." The champagne flute in someone's hand slipped and shattered on the marble. That was the only sound for a full 5 seconds. Callista's smile froze. Her eyes went wide, darting toward our mother, then toward the CEO sitting a few tables over. She stepped forward, grabbing the mic from the podium with hands that had started to tremble. "Let's all just take a breath," she said, her voice quivering behind its practiced steadiness. "My sisters obviously had a rough night. Emotions are high. Let's not make this into a circus." I didn't move. I didn't blink. Instead, I opened the envelope. Slowly,
Carefully.
I pulled out the signed termination orders, unfolded them, and placed them flat on the head table. Then I tapped the screen on my phone and placed it down beside the paper's speakerphone on. Ben's voice filled the space. "This is Benjamin Reed, legal counsel to Raya Jameson. I can confirm, per the documents filed and signed under state and federal compliance, all executive changes are valid and effective as of today. A press release is scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow." I hung up before anyone could respond. For a moment, the room didn't breathe. Callista's grip on the mic faltered. I could see her processing, scrambling behind her eyes. She knew what had just happened, even if most of the guests were still stunned. She was no longer the queen of the room. She was the headline of a scandal. But she didn't go quietly. She stepped forward again and tried to laugh. Okay, she said. "We've had our fun. But this is my night, Raya. Let's not turn it into some family feud for the press to chew on." Then, right there, she walked toward me. I saw her body tense, the desperation just beneath her carefully arranged expression. When she reached me, she pulled me into a hug before I could react.
Tight.
Controlling. Her lips pressed near my ear, her voice barely audible. "You got what you wanted. Just smile," she said. But her eyes flicked toward a guest still holding up a phone, live streaming. That was her real audience. She wasn't hugging me. She was staging a photo. I leaned back, not forcefully, just enough to create space between us. Her arms loosened. She tried to maintain her look of gracious defeat. I took the microphone back. "There's a difference between forgiveness and forgetting," I said clearly, facing the room, my voice anchored in something deeper than anger. "And I don't know either tonight."
Gasps again.
But this time, they weren't against me. Callista backed away a step. A beat passed. She opened her mouth as if to respond, but no words came out. I returned to my seat and picked up my glass, the one I had refused earlier. I lifted it, Not in toast, but as a signal, to myself more than anyone, that I had reclaimed the moment. And I drank,
Slowly.
without a word. The guests remained seated, stunned into quiet. The music had stopped long ago. Even the staff looked unsure of what came next. Eventually, someone turned off the live stream. That was when the room truly fell into silence. No one looked at Callista. And if they did, it wasn't with admiration anymore. It was confusion, caution, maybe a bit of fear. She stood there, frozen on a stage that no longer belonged to her. I felt none of the satisfaction I'd always imagined might come. No fireworks, no thrill, just stillness and truth. For years, I had been taught to swallow things for the sake of peace, to be small so others could be loud, to vanish so others could be seen. Tonight, I learned that silence, when chosen, is not weakness. It's power. And now the room was mine. But Callista wasn't done.
And neither was I.
The hum in the ballroom hadn't died yet. It buzzed beneath the skin of the guests, confusion, curiosity, the faint electric thrill of scandal. I could feel it too, the tension building like pressure before a storm fully breaks. Callista stood near the podium again, shoulders squared, her smile too sharp to be real. "Folks," she began, her voice echoing over the speakers, "let's all just take a breath. My sister's emotional. She's misunderstood how things work. There's no need for panic. This is all just a miscommunication." A nervous laugh rippled through the room, the kind that people use when they're not sure which side to pick. I didn't move. I let her keep talking. She went on, gesturing dramatically. "You all know how families can be. Passionate, complicated. Raya just got caught up in it. I love her, of course. I always have." Her tone was syrup thick and meant to charm. But no one laughed this time. No one clapped. From the back of the room, I saw Jace, phone in hand, filming quietly. His expression wasn't smug, just resolute. A witness who knew where the truth lived. Callista kept performing. "Let's get this straightened out," she said, addressing the crowd, "before rumors get out of hand. Everything's fine. Everything's still under control." That word, control, snapped something inside me. I walked toward the stage, steady, deliberate. Each step sounded louder than it should have. My heels clicked against the marble in rhythm with my heartbeat. When I reached the podium, I didn't take the mic. I took the folder from my purse and laid it on the stand, flipping it open so the audience could see. "Everything," I said, "is exactly under control." I unfolded the top document, my father's signature shining faintly beneath the ballroom lights. "As of this morning, all executive authority rests with me. Callista Jameson is no longer employed by Altera Holdings or any of its subsidiaries." Gasps echoed like wind through tall grass. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another person dropped their glass. Callista laughed, but it cracked halfway through. "You're bluffing." I met her eyes. "This isn't personal," I said quietly. "It's compliance." Her face drained of color. I turned the first few pages, letting the sound of paper slice through the silence. "The board has already been notified. The legal counsel has confirmed." I glanced toward the audience. "You'll receive an official statement tomorrow morning. No yelling, no drama, just the truth laid bare." Callista's breathing grew uneven. "You can't do this," she said, almost whispering, though the microphone caught every word. "You wouldn't dare humiliate your own sister." I tilted my head slightly. "You did that yourself." The words landed heavier than I expected. She stumbled a half step backward, looking around for support. But there was none. The same crowd that once clung to her laughter now avoided her eyes. "Security," she barked, her voice trembling. "Someone stop her." Two security guards hesitated by the doorway, glancing toward me, then at one another. They didn't move. The MC, still holding his cue cards, murmured to no one in particular, "This isn't part of the program, right?" No one answered him. Callista turned her frustration outward. "You people don't get it," she shouted, scanning the audience. "You don't know what she's like. She's jealous. She's vindictive. She's been trying to destroy me for years." Her voice wavered, more panic than conviction now. I waited until the noise died down again. Then I said, softly but clearly, "No, Callista. You did that all by yourself." The last of her supporters shifted uncomfortably. One by one, people began to move away from her. No shouting, no confrontation, just quiet withdrawal. It was worse than booing. It was erasure. She stood alone on the stage that once felt like her throne. Her hands trembled, clutching the microphone like it was an anchor. I turned away. The lights suddenly felt too bright. The music had long since stopped, leaving only the hum of whispered disbelief. I walked past rows of tables, past empty champagne glasses, and the smell of overdone luxury. Outside, the air was cold and merciful. I stepped into the night, the noise of traffic humming far below on Wilshire Boulevard. The sky over Los Angeles was clear for once, a rare thing, and the stars were faint but visible. I breathed deeply, letting the cool air wash the taste of that room off my tongue. When I reached the car, I slid into the back seat and closed the door. For the first time that night, it was silent. My phone buzzed against my palm. A notification flashed. Video file from Merrick Jameson. My heart tightened. The first video had changed my understanding of my past. I didn't know if I was ready for whatever this one would reveal. Still, I pressed play. Dad appeared again, sitting in that same garage, the same sign behind him, the same grease-stained shirt. Only this time, he smiled before speaking. "If you're watching this, kiddo," he began, "then I guess the hard part's over. Or, at least the part one could help you with." He chuckled softly. "I've been thinking about legacy. People like to talk about leaving something behind. But the truth is, most folks spend their lives trying to be remembered by the wrong people." He leaned forward, closer to the camera. "If they choose to forget you, let that be their loss. But you, Raya, don't ever forget yourself." He paused, eyes softening. "You've spent your life trying to earn what was already yours. You don't have to anymore. You never did." The video ended with a faint sound of him laughing, a small, familiar sound I hadn't realized I'd forgotten. I sat there, watching the blank screen until it dimmed. The driver turned slightly. "Everything all right, ma'am?" I nodded. "Yeah," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "Everything's finally all right." The car pulled into motion, city lights reflecting across the glass. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the hum of the road lull me into stillness. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel small. And just like that, I wasn't erased anymore. But I wasn't healed either. A week passed. No headlines that included me anyway. I didn't want them. I had nothing to sell, no story to feed into the hands of gossip or glory. Let them run with publicist falls from grace and speculate endlessly about insider takeovers and broken family ties. They'd never guess what really happened because the truth was too quiet for cameras. I was home, back in Austin. The morning light stretched across my kitchen floor, golden and warm, the way it always did this time of year. I stood barefoot by the sink, watering the succulents that lined my windowsill. The ones no one ever asked about, but I kept alive anyway. The kettle clicked off. I poured hot water over the tea bag and let it steep as I scrolled through my phone. News apps still buzzed about the PR scandal unraveling in Los Angeles. Callista's firm was under audit. Multiple resignations. Internal memos leaked. I didn't smile. There was no victory in watching someone unravel, even if they'd tried to do the same to you. Still, I felt settled. Not whole, but steady. I opened my inbox again, like I had every day since the night of the party. Still no email from her. No subject line with a simple, "Can we talk?" No voicemail apologizing for what she let happen. Not even silence with weight, just absence. I hovered over a draft I'd written days ago. A message I thought maybe I'd send to Mom. Not to fix anything, just to say something. I read it one last time. It was short. Soft. Too soft. Then I deleted it. She made her choice. And I made mine. Later that afternoon, I drove across town to the old garage. Dad's place. No one had touched it since he passed. The windows were dusty, the sign still half hanging over the entrance. Merrick's Auto and Service. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the smell of oil and old pine hitting me like time hadn't passed at all. I walked past the workbench where he used to tinker with clocks, even though he never once fixed one completely. I moved toward the back, where the clutter grew thick with boxes and forgotten things. And then I saw it. A framed photo, tucked in the corner. Me, maybe 9 years old, covered in grease, grinning wide beside him. My hair was messy, my overalls too big, and my hands were black with oil, but I looked proud. Next to it was a small wooden plaque, hand-carved, the kind he used to make when money was tight and birthdays still needed gifts. It read, "The quiet ones build the strongest foundations." I don't remember him ever showing it to me. Maybe he meant to, maybe he thought I'd already understood. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting that weight settle in. That evening, I stood at the front of a small conference room at the community center. The folding chairs were mismatched, the coffee slightly burnt, but the room was full of women, small business owners, dreamers, fighters. People like me, once silenced in family photos, now trying to be heard in their own lives. I hadn't planned to speak. I was just there to support the group. But when someone asked if I'd like to share, I found myself standing, clearing my throat, heart steady. I don't want to talk about the scandal, I began. I want to talk about reclaiming your story. Every eye turned toward me. I spoke, not as a victim, not as a victor, but as someone who'd lived through both. I grew up being told I was too sensitive, too quiet, too complicated. And for years, I thought I had to become someone else to be accepted, louder, flashier, more likable. But in the end, all I needed was to be myself. Out loud. Jace stood near the back, managing the AV cables. Our eyes met briefly. He nodded once. I'm not here to give advice, I continued. Just to say, don't let anyone write your ending for you. A hush followed, not awkward, but heavy with understanding. Then a voice from the back. A woman in her 50s, dark curls streaked with silver, stood and said, "Thank you for not letting them erase you." I smiled, but this time there was no bitterness in it, only truth. After the meeting, I stayed behind to stack chairs and help clean up. Jace came over with a half-empty box of cookies and a tired grin. "Looks like you've got a room full of people who heard you loud and clear," he said. "Yeah," I replied. And for once, I wasn't whispering. I drove home in silence, letting the day settle. The traffic lights blinked green like quiet permission to keep going. Inside, I tossed my keys in the dish, slipped off my shoes, and poured myself a glass of water. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check the news. I sat on the couch and let the quiet wrap around me like an old friend I hadn't trusted in a long time. I was still alone, still healing, but something had shifted. They thought breaking me would end me. All they did was give me back my voice. There is no next chapter for them, but I'm just getting started. Sometimes, the most powerful act of revenge isn't loud. It's reclaiming your story with quiet, unwavering strength. Raya didn't destroy her sister. She simply stopped letting others define her worth. What about you? Have you ever been made invisible by the people who are supposed to see you the most? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories of resilience, justice, and redemption. Your voice matters here.